The knight's words hung in the air like a curse, heavy and chilling. "That which you have eaten was truly the heart of Sir Guglielmo Guardastagno, who you, disloyal woman that you are, loved. And I know for sure. A short while before I came back, I plucked it from his breast with my own hands." The hall fell silent, the only sound the woman's gasp of horror. Her eyes widened and her face drained of color. She clutched her stomach, as if trying to keep the vile contents from rising. The knight's cold, accusing gaze bore into her, and she stumbled backward, her hands shaking. In that moment, the heart became more than just a physical organ. It was a symbol of love, betrayal, and the darkest depths of human emotion. For centuries, medieval authors and artists had used the heart to convey the most intense of feelings, from the soaring heights of love to the deepest pits of vengeance. In the world of courtly love, the heart was a powerful symbol. One of the earliest depictions of the heart can be found in a French manuscript from the 1250s, Le Roman de la Poire, The Romance of the Pear. The story is simple. A poet receives a pear from his estranged lover, and he sets out to find her in Paris. Along the way, he encounters personifications of various emotions and virtues, such as beauty, loyalty, and mercy. When he finally finds his beloved, their first meeting is not a simple glance but a symbolic moment. A kneeling messenger named Douze Regards, meaning sweet looks, holds up the poet's heart to the lady, as if it were speaking to her heart directly. The heart in this illustration looks more like a pear than the familiar heart shape we know today, but it serves as a powerful symbol of shared affection. The heart shape as we know it today didn't become widely recognized until the end of the medieval period. Before that, shaped symbols were just one of many decorative motifs. It's believed that the heart shape may have been inspired by the leaves of plants thought to be aphrodisiacs, or it may have naturally evolved to fit descriptions of the heart as a two-chambered organ with a more pointed end. The advent of printing in the 1450s helped spread this symbol, making it a common feature in printed images and playing cards. These heart-shaped trinkets were more than just decorations. They were tokens of romantic affection. Boxes, combs, and even entire artworks were crafted in the shape of hearts, each one a testament to the deep emotions they represented. In some cases, the heart was a vulnerability, a way to show one's innermost feelings and leave oneself open to the possibility of rejection. A German tapestry from around 1360 shows a couple weighing their hearts on a scale, but the scales tip unequally, symbolizing unrequited love. The man looks unhappy, while the woman seems indifferent, pointing to her own light, unresponsive heart. The heart was also a symbol of religious devotion. The cult of the Sacred Heart, which focused on Christ's heart, became a powerful force in medieval Christianity. The deep wound in Christ's side, made by the lance of St. Longinus, was believed to have pierced his heart, revealing the secrets of his divine soul. This focus on Christ's heart inspired intense devotion, with some religious figures even claiming to have had their hearts surgically altered as a sign of their love for God. For example, St. Catherine of Siena claimed to have exchanged hearts with Christ during a levitation. In the city of Nuremberg, the Holy Lance which had pierced Christ's side became a powerful relic. Pilgrims flocked to see it, and small woodblock prints called spear builder, spear pictures were sold as souvenirs. These prints depicted a heart pierced by the Holy Lance, and they were believed to be sanctified by the actual relic. The heart in these images was a symbol of the intense, sacred pain that Christ endured, a pain that was both physical and emotional. The heart in medieval times was a complex symbol. It was the center of love, the source of betrayal, and the seat of divine connection. It was a way for people to express the most profound and intimate aspects of their lives, whether through the trials of romantic love or the depths of religious devotion. And in the hall, as the woman clutched her stomach, the heart became a reminder of the power and the pain of human emotion. In the early 1400s, a unique figure appeared in a Hebrew medical book, a manuscript filled with knowledge from great minds of the past. This figure, a mix of man, beast, and object, stares wide-eyed from the page, with red lines shooting out from his body and Hebrew text scattered around him. He might look strange, but he was a guide for doctors trying to heal people using blood. Blood was seen as the most important part of the body back then. Doctors believed that controlling blood flow was key to keeping the body in balance. One of the main ways they did this was through bloodletting, or phlebotomy. They thought that letting blood out could help with all sorts of problems, from headaches to preparing the body for seasonal changes. They used a sharp, short knife to make small cuts and let the blood flow. The figure in the Hebrew manuscript is covered in red lines that point to different parts of the body. These lines show where doctors should make cuts to treat specific issues. For example, the line on the left arm points to the basilic vein, which was thought to help with stomach and liver problems. The veins in the thumb were used to treat head pain, and the veins under the tongue could help with dizziness and throat issues. Doctors also believed that the timing of bloodletting was crucial. They thought the body was connected to the stars and planets, and different body parts were linked to different zodiac signs. For instance, the sign of Aries was linked to the head, and when the moon was in Aries, it was a good time to treat head problems. The figure in the manuscript shows the zodiac signs on and around the body to help doctors decide when to perform bloodletting. This type of medical knowledge wasn't just for Jews. It was shared by Christian and Muslim healers too. It shows how different cultures could work together and share ideas about health and healing. However, not all uses of blood in medieval times were positive. In 1144, in the city of Norwich, England, a young boy named William was found dead in a forest. A monk named Thomas of Monmouth later wrote a story about William's death, claiming that local Jews had killed him in a ritual murder. Thomas said the Jews wanted William's blood for a ritual that mocked the crucifixion of Christ. This story was the first of many similar accusations, known as blood libel, that would spread hate and fear against Jews for centuries. Thomas's story became very popular. People believed that William was a holy martyr, and he was even buried in the cathedral. The story of William and other similar cases, like the death of a boy named Simon in Trent in 1475, led to violence and persecution against Jewish communities. In 1181, the Jews were expelled from Bury St. Edmunds, and in 1290 they were expelled from all of England. These stories were often accompanied by images that showed Jews as monsters, forcing pins into the bodies of young boys and collecting their blood. One such image from 1493 shows the death of Simon, with Jews depicted in exaggerated and offensive ways. The image emphasizes the blood, with bright red streaks showing the wounds and the blood collecting in a dish. The idea of blood, which was once seen as a source of life and healing, became a tool for fear and division. The bloodletting figure in the Hebrew manuscript and the stories of blood libel show how the same substance could be used for both good and evil, reflecting the complex and often dark history of medieval medicine and society. In the medieval world, the reverence for holy blood was deeply intertwined with Christian faith and practice. This sacred substance, believed to be the blood of Christ, played a crucial role in the rituals and beliefs of the time. The most central of these was the Eucharist, a ritual where bread and wine were transformed into the body and blood of Christ through a process called transubstantiation. This transformation was not just symbolic. It was seen as a literal and miraculous event. The roots of this practice can be traced back to the New Testament, where Jesus, during the Last Supper, took bread and wine and declared them to be his body and blood. He said, "Take, eat, this is my body, and this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many." This act was adopted by early Christians and became a cornerstone of their worship. However, by the 13th century, the Church had clarified that only the priest was to consume the bread and wine, while the laity could only watch from the pews. This moment, when the priest held the consecrated bread aloft, became a powerful and emotional part of the Mass, bringing the distant events of Christ's life and death into the present, and uniting the congregation in a shared spiritual experience. The Eucharist was not the only way Christ's blood was venerated. Relics, believed to contain Christ's blood, emerged in various parts of Europe. For example, a vial of Christ's blood was brought to London by King Henry III from Jerusalem, and carried in a grand procession from St. Paul's Cathedral to Westminster Abbey. The vial was housed in a luxurious rock crystal vase, reflecting the deep reverence and the immense value placed on such relics. Similar relics were found in other parts of Europe, such as the blood-soaked garment in the Cathedral of San Salvador in Oviedo, Spain, and the blood relic in St. Basil's Chapel in Bruges, which was said to have been brought back from the Holy Land during the Second Crusade. These relics were often housed in ornate containers, known as reliquaries, which were crafted from precious metals and adorned with jewels. The Tassilo chalice, made in the late 8th century for Liutperga, the wife of the Bavarian Duke Tassilo III, is a prime example of the lavish attention given to these objects. The chalice, still housed at the Benedictine Abbey at Kremsmünster, is a testament to the importance of the Eucharist and the Holy Blood in medieval religious life. The Eucharist and blood relics were not just spiritual symbols. They were also believed to have practical and miraculous powers. People would request the presence of these relics for various reasons, from seeking good fortune in business to commemorating the dead. The blood of Christ was seen as a source of healing and protection, and its presence was thought to imbue the faithful with divine grace. However, the reality of blood could sometimes be too much for some to handle. A 14th-century Frenchwoman, for example, found the Eucharist unpleasant because it reminded her of the bloody afterbirth of childbirth, a visceral and earthly image that clashed with the spiritual and holy nature of the sacrament. This highlights a contradiction in medieval religious life. While the idea of Christ's blood was revered, its physical reality could be unsettling. The concept of blood extended beyond the Eucharist and relics. In medieval folklore, blood was believed to have the power to bring the dead back to life, a phenomenon known as cruntation. It was said that a corpse could bleed afresh when in the presence of its murderer, a magical form of forensic proof. This belief in the animating power of blood was also seen in religious art and objects. Icons, statues, and even the Eucharistic wafers were reported to bleed, a sign of their spiritual vitality and the presence of the divine. One of the most famous examples of a bleeding wafer occurred in Wilsnack, Germany, in the 14th century. 3 Eucharistic wafers survived a church fire and were found to have shed blood at their centers. This event attracted pilgrims from far and wide, who came to witness the miraculous occurrence. Similar bleeding wafers were venerated in other parts of Europe, such as Waldern, Weingarten, Orvieto, and Dijon. These events were seen as concrete proof of Christ's presence in the Eucharist and the authenticity of the relics. However, not all such occurrences were accepted without question. The Church and the laity were both capable of distinguishing between genuine miracles and fakes. For example, a medieval religious play, La Sainte Resurrection, included stage directions for a bleeding prop. The play instructed that a large wooden statue of Jesus, with a hidden bladder of animal blood, should be stabbed to create the illusion of bleeding. This shows that medieval audiences were aware of the difference between theatrical tricks and genuine spiritual phenomena. In this way, the reverence for holy blood in medieval times was a complex and multifaceted aspect of religious life, blending deep spiritual beliefs with practical and sometimes skeptical observations. The blood of Christ was both a source of profound faith and a subject of careful scrutiny, reflecting the intricate relationship between the divine and the human in medieval Europe. In the medieval world, life was full of wonders and mysteries, some of which were written down in books that give us a glimpse into how people thought and lived. One of the most fascinating aspects of medieval culture was the way people understood and treated the human body, especially when it came to injuries and diseases. Surgeons, who were like today's doctors, played a crucial role in treating the wounded. But unlike modern doctors, medieval surgeons had to rely on a mix of practical knowledge, ancient texts, and sometimes even a bit of magic. One of the most intriguing images from this time is the wound man. This figure, often found in medical books from the late 14th century in Germany, is a detailed illustration of a man covered in various injuries and wounds. His body is pierced by knives, spears, and arrows, and he is bitten by animals like snakes and scorpions. Despite the horrific state he is in, the wound man is not just a gruesome picture. He is a practical guide for surgeons. Around his body, there are numbers and text that point to specific sections in the book where readers can find treatments for each type of wound. For example, next to a spider crawling up his thigh, it says, "When a spider bites, 20, which tells the reader to turn to paragraph 20 for the cure. Inside his left thigh, it reads, 38, an arrow whose shaft is still in place, directing the reader to the part of the book that explains how to remove an arrow and treat the wound. These detailed instructions were crucial for surgeons, who often had to deal with injuries from accidents or battles. One of the most important treatments in medieval surgery was stopping bleeding. Blood was seen as a vital substance, and losing too much of it could be deadly. Surgeons used a special powder called a styptic to help stop bleeding. This powder was made from a mix of red ingredients, like a very dark red wine, a red stone called hematite, and a tree sap known as dragon's blood. The color red was thought to be powerful in stopping blood flow, and these ingredients were carefully chosen for their healing properties. Medieval surgeons also learned from ancient texts. For example, the 10th century Arabic surgeon al-Zarawi wrote about different ways to stitch wounds, and the 7th century Byzantine surgeon Paul of Aegina described how to use fine wool thread to sew up injuries. These methods were passed down through the centuries, and were still used by medieval surgeons. But surgery wasn't just about practical techniques, it also had a spiritual side. Many treatments involved prayers and charms. Some cures called for invoking the names of saints, or reciting specific prayers to help heal the patient. This blend of medical knowledge and religious belief was common in medieval times, and reflected the deep connection between the physical and spiritual worlds. The wound man, with his numerous injuries, might seem like a figure frozen in pain, but he was also a symbol of hope. He showed that even the most severe wounds could be treated with the right knowledge and skills. His image was a reminder that surgeons were not just cutting and stitching. They were also healers who could bring life back to those on the brink of death. In the same way that the wound man represented the physical side of healing, there were also objects that captured the more everyday aspects of medieval life. One such object is a small ivory plaque from 14th century France, now housed in the British Museum. This tiny piece, about the size of a large coin, was probably part of a writing tablet. On one side, it is carved with a scene of people playing a game called hot cockles, or the hot hand. In this game, someone is blindfolded and then spanked, and they have to guess who hit them by the feel of the spank. If they guess correctly, they get a kiss. The plaque shows a young man kneeling with his head under a woman's skirt, unable to see. His hand is creeping up her thigh, hinting at the game's more playful and sometimes flirtatious nature. The women behind him are about to spank him, and in the corner, a couple is kissing. The scene is full of hands touching, patting, and spanking, emphasizing the importance of touch in medieval life. Touch was a complex sense in the Middle Ages. While it was considered the most basic of the senses, it was also vital for diagnosing illnesses. Doctors would use their hands to feel a patient's body, checking for swelling, texture, and other signs of health. This hands-on approach was so important that medieval scholars believed touch was essential for life itself. Without the sense of touch, a person was thought to be dead. But what about when doctors needed to use tools? If touch was so important, didn't using instruments create a barrier? To solve this, medieval surgeons began to think of their tools as extensions of their own bodies. The word surgery comes from the Greek words for hand and work, emphasizing the close connection between the surgeon's hands and their tools. Surgeons describe their instruments as being like their own fingers and nails, and they believed that using these tools allowed them to touch the patient indirectly but still effectively. This way of thinking about tools as part of the body was reflected in the language. Surgeons were sometimes called lech. Doctors and their tools were called lechfingier, doctor's fingers. The Italian surgeon Lanfranc of Milan even wrote that a good surgeon needed to have well-shaped hands with long, steady fingers, much like the tools they used. In the medieval world, the wound man and the ivory plaque both tell stories of how people understood and interacted with their bodies. The wound man shows the practical and sometimes spiritual side of healing, while the plaque captures the everyday playfulness and importance of touch. Together, they give us a glimpse into a world where life and health were closely intertwined with the hands of those who cared for the sick and injured. As we look back at the tools and hands that shaped the medieval world, we glimpse a time when every object and gesture held deep meaning. The surgical instruments of al-Zarawi, with their intricate designs and ornate grips, were not just tools for healing. They were symbols of a surgeon's skill and status. These tools were so vital that they were often mentioned in wills alongside cherished books and personal belongings. The guilds that regulated the practice of surgery ensured that only those with the right tools and training could practice, and the loss of these instruments could mean the end of a career. In the hands of medieval craftsmen and surgeons, tools came to life. A saw, for example, was more than just a piece of metal. It could be a loyal companion, even a voice of wisdom. In literature, Tools like the carpenter's saw spoke of hard work and common sense, reflecting the values of the people who used them. These tools were not just objects but characters in their own right, witnessing and commenting on the world around them. The hands that wielded these tools were also rich with meaning. Manicules, those little pointing hands in the margins of manuscripts, guided readers to important passages, creating a lasting record of what mattered most. Reading was a tactile experience, with fingers tracing lines of text and turning pages until the parchment darkened from use. Some texts were loved so much that the pages of holy figures were rubbed away, a testament to the deep emotions they evoke. The hand was also a tool for memory and divination. Guido of Arezzo used the hand to teach music, assigning notes to the fingers and joints, creating a system that helped singers remember complex tune. Chiromancers, or palm readers, believed that the lines and marks on the hand could predict a person's future, from their health to their wealth. While some saw these practices as mere games, others took them seriously, using them to make important life decisions. Beyond these specific examples, there were countless gestures and signs that were part of daily life in the Middle Ages. These social customs and gestures, now lost to time, formed a rich and intricate language that bound communities together. They remind us that the past was not just a series of events, but a world filled with meaning, where every tool and gesture had a story to tell. As we reflect on these tools and hands, we are reminded of the ingenuity and creativity of medieval people. They crafted tools that were both functional and beautiful, and they used their hands to shape their world in ways that continue to fascinate us today. In the end, the tools and hands of the Middle Ages are more than just relics of the past. They are a window into a world where every object and gesture held a deeper significance.